and I now call upon Keenan to continue the proposition case.
God, I love these suspenders. I'm pretty sure everyone in here would agree that Bernie Madoff was a pretty bad guy. He stole billions of dollars from thousands of people. On Side Opposition today, what they're telling us is that if he died and left all of that money to his wife, she would not have to pay it back to anybody because she didn't have any control over his actions. On Side Proposition today, we've shown you already that governments have a responsibility to pay for the injustices that have put them in the situation that they are today, that have given them the money and the resources that have put them at the top of the economic ladder. And that is something that New Zealand has never addressed today. But let's look at exactly what they've told us. Their first three constructive arguments. Well, let's even look before that. They started by saying that what Team Canada is trying to do is we're trying to make it so that the German government would give all of its money to Israel as opposed to poor African countries. Well, first off, that's simply not true. We would say that the German government has just as much responsibility to pay to its German colonies in Africa, many of whom are desperately poor because of the mercantilist structure. Beyond that, we would say that it does have a responsibility to the people of Israel, for the families that it systematically destroyed. And we don't think that just because Israel is fairly well-to-do, that stops there being some responsibility. We say that this is the same as saying that a thief doesn't have to give back the TV because they stole it from a millionaire, and hey, they can give up the TV here and there. It doesn't deal with the legal ramifications outside Canada's case today. Now let's look at their three arguments in turn. First off is this idea that we're not punishing those who actually committed the crime. And this is just wrong. We've already shown you on Side Proposition today that there is a clear continuity of the state. And that because of that, the state has to pay for the harms of past governments within that state. Why is that? Well, because even if we accept their model, or their idea, that the government is just a construct that represents the people, we say that the reason that the people are where they are today is because the systematic oppression of other people in the past. And that is the link between the past and the present, is the fact that the present is based on the injustices of the past. And that's something that Team New Zealand has simply ignored today. No thank you. So let's look at their second point, which is the idea that it's unfair to tax everybody to pay to groups that were oppressed in the past. And we say this is wrong on a couple of levels. First off, they've already accepted that the progeny of perpetrators of societal injustice are the richest people in society, and therefore they pay the most taxes. So what we'd say on Team Canada is they're the people that are paying mostly for this. I'll take you in a moment. Beyond this fact, we'd say that people don't get a choice of what they pay taxes to. We say that the government has responsibilities that go far beyond what an individual person wants to pay for. And because of that, even if we accept their argument that these are not the right people to take the money from, the state still has responsibility and people don't have that right over their tax dollars. Yes, ma'am?
Do you think that we should pay out to every woman for the crimes committed against her by the state because of her sex?
What we would say is that the systematic oppression and colonialism we've seen is quite different than the societal injustice we saw against women. But if women could demonstrate clearly that the state had oppressed them for hundreds of years in the same way that it did with colonialism, in the same way it did with slavery, then yes, we would pay women for that. And that is something we don't think that Team New Zealand can stand on today. So let's look at their third argument. This idea that it's not always good for the people at the end of the day. That sometimes the people just don't need the money. And we say that this falls for the primary reason that this ignores the legal argument that Team Canada is putting forward today. We've already shown you that these groups are responsible, and therefore it doesn't matter this current economic situation of the people that were wronged in the past. But beyond that, we'd say the vast majority of the time, it's the people that have been wronged in the past and the groups that have been wronged in the past are the unequal ones that both sides of the House want help today. So what are we showing you on Team Canada? Well, we've already shown you that there's a liability of the payer and that there are direct benefits from compensation. And I'm going to be discussing to you the idea of accountability and the need for accountability and the basis of creating an air of accountability and a precedent of accountability in the international community. And in doing so, we're going to prove to our team line today that time doesn't heal all wounds, that sometimes you need a little bit of dough. Now, let's look at this idea of accountability. And what we're saying on Team Canada today is that societal injustice does not have a statute of limitations. There must be reparations for injustice, and there must be an acknowledgement of past wrongs. We've already seen that acknowledgement of past wrongs. We've already seen governments, even the Canadian government, saying that it has wronged groups in the past. But then it says, well, no, we wronged you and we'll apologize for that, but we really don't want to open the purse and give you a little bit of money. We think that this is a double standard, and we think that reparation must be tied to the acknowledgement of the wrong. Beyond that, we'd say there must be a realization of the intergenerational repercussions of a state's actions. We must realize that a state does not act in temporal isolation. It doesn't act only for today. Its actions actually affect people all the way down the line. So what does this mean? Well, we would say that when we look at why a state commits injustices, on the massive levels that we've seen in the past, the massive levels of colonialism and of slavery, we say it's because there are immediate benefits, there's immediate incentives, for doing so. We say that there are economic benefits, and that's why people took slaves in the past. That's why there was these mercantilistic structures. But what we would say on Team Canada today is there needs to be a counterbalance. There needs to be the idea that you don't get away with your crime if you die before you're brought to justice. That those crimes will eventually come to light, and those crimes will eventually be repaired. What we need to see is that there needs to be a recognition that these actions are not temporally isolated. And there needs to be direct disincentives to committing these wrongs in the future. What we would say is that you don't get away just by giving it a little bit of time. You don't get away just by saying that your children inherit your money and therefore you're out of the game. What we would say is that on Team Canada today, what we're doing is we're setting a precedent for not negatively affecting the future. Because we think that people do care for their children. People do care for their grandchildren. People do care for their great-grandchildren. And because of that, and I'll take you in a moment, because of that, people are not going to set up these actions if they don't think that their children and grandchildren are going to be benefited by it. Yes, ma'am?
Are people more or less likely to resent and discriminate against these groups when they receive the kind of compensation you're talking about?
What we would say is that a lot of the resentment is the other way around. We say the resentment is actually what we're seeing right now when groups that have been culturally oppressed for hundreds and thousands of years are not getting the compensation so that they can compete at the same level as the people that have oppressed them in the past. We say this actually brings groups closer together by remedying the inequities and the imbalances and the injustices between them. But let's get back to this idea. What we'd say on Team Canada today is that it's imperative, especially at this point in history, that we understand that the state's actions affect future generations. And because of that, we think it's imperative that states make sure that in the future, their children and their grandchildren will have to pay. And the reason for that is we think that that will limit the ability and the want for a state to do those kind of societal inequities and those kind of long-reaching harms that we see today. So what we would say on Team Canada is this is actually the best plan for the future. And the reason we need to do this for the past first is because we've got a little bit of backlog from the hundreds of years of colonialism. So at the end of this debate, it's not about the German government giving money to Israel. It's about countries that are poor, countries that have been stripped of their natural resources and have had their families shipped overseas to work in forced labor camps being paid for that injustice. It's about righting the wrongs of the past. And because of that, we beg to propose. Thank you.